Dr. Premnath, I've already introduced him, so I move on to Dr. Aravind Chinchure, who is going to be also part of this session. Dr. Aravind is PhD in physics, has 30 years of experience in R&D, technology transfer, innovation, IP, startups, and policy. He's a visiting faculty at ICER Pune, serves on Manipal University, Jaipur's board, and is founder and CEO of QLIP Academy, which develops leaders in Industry 4.0 and innovation. I also want to introduce my colleague Vidula Valimbe, who is a PhD and RTTP.
There.
She has expertise in technology assessment, patent analytics, and innovation management. She has served as a single point of contact for several organizations supporting IP strategy, technology transfer processes, and policy development, where she has evaluated numerous technologies for their commercial readiness, market potential, innovation, impact, and competitive landscape. Also, she has played a key role in enabling spin-offs and strengthening institutional IP frameworks. With a PhD in law, she brings a unique blend of legal and technical insights to this table. So with this brief introduction, I'm going to hand over the session to Dr. Premnath.
Thank you. Okay, I will have to rush a little bit here, so please forgive me, but I thought I'll take a few moments to talk about policies and guidelines and then take it from there. So the first thing I want to talk about is the scope of the TTO itself, right? And the reason it's important is because that decides the kind of policies you wish to have, right? Because there are many, many parts of the story. I don't want to belabor this to point, but I just wanted to explain that, let's understand the scope of the activities first. I think Richard has already covered a lot of it, so I can jump through most of it. I just thought I'll just put down MIT TLO's mission statement here. Mission is to move innovations and discoveries from the lab to the marketplace for the benefit of the public and to amplify MIT's global impact. Goes along with what Richard said about the institutional reputation being one of the key goals that you want to strive towards, right? Okay. So TTO is the organization that's going to carry that activity out. And there are different forms of TTOs, and in India, for example, you will see many different variations of it. One is it's part of a department like Business Development Division in CSIR labs, right? Sometimes it's part of an IRCC, say in IIT Bombay, or an ICNCSR in IIT Madras. There's a specific TTO in BITS Pilani. So these are like departments which are existing it's not a legal entity, it's a department, okay? There are also cases where people have standalone departments. It's not part of a department, but it's a standalone department. So for some of you who are doing, say, business development in your labs, you are also doing contract management for sponsored research. You're also doing consulting projects, all of that. But the TTO role is actually focused on tech transfer, right? And specifically technology and taking it ahead specifically. Sometimes in the US, for example, you will see those as independent activities where in many cases, consulting programs and sponsored research and all might be handled differently than the tech transfer office. And then there are cases of separate entities, right? So FITT in IIT Delhi is a separate entity. But at the same time, NRDC was meant as a separate entity to do tech transfer for CSIR. This was, by the way, 1953, okay, that they could think about it. Did very well. BCIL was similar for, say, the DBT labs. In the US, you have Wisconsin's Alumni Research Foundation or Oxford Innovations in the UK, Cambridge Enterprise in the UK. The new name of partners is Mass General Brigham for MGH and Brigham, for in the US as well, in the Harvard Medical School. These are sort of independent entities, set up as independent entities. Whether it's good or not is a different matter altogether. And there might be different roles that TTOs play, and these are some, I've just tried to list some different roles. The blue ones are sort of very core to a TTO, right? You'll see I'm just going to try to reorganize this in the next slide into parts, okay? It may be organized in different ways. The first box on the right that you see has to do with IP protection and portfolio management, right? Which many of us do in some way or the other. Some of us do more in-house than outsourced. In the US, it's a lot more outsourced in terms of management happens in-house, but there are a lot many IP attorneys and all that you deal with differently than how it happens in India, right? Valorizing technology assets is something which I'm increasingly seeing many tech transfer offices do, which was not there in many years back. For example, people are running their own proof of concept funding buckets. There are entities which run their own funding to just enhance the TRL levels or to advance the technology further, and this is happening from inside the organization as well, and some institutes have very large pockets of funds as well. And then of course the technology marketing and transactions, where there is assessment, marketing, advancing a lead closer to deal making, deal closure, valuations and so on, and post deal contract lifecycle management as well, right? And finally, this is again something which has become increasingly important in the coming years, which is venturing, right, and routes to market. This used to be not so important in the past. There would be cases it would be treated just like another licensing deal, but increasingly it is becoming a very large focus in terms of the route to market. Startups as a route to market is becoming extremely important. So these boxes, typically in your organizations, you might have an IP cell doing that, right? This may or may not be there, depends on whether you have access to funds, not access to funds. Many institutions don't have that activity at all. This one of marketing and transaction is what is the core of a TTO, right? And this one sometimes is handled by an incubator, right? For some of your institutions, but there is a role within the organization and there is a role outside the organization also, because the moment you create an independent entity like Venture Center is compared to NCL, they will have a little wider canvas than focus only on NCL's technologies, right? That is something which will happen as we go along as well. Okay. So the policies that you choose will depend upon the kind of scope that you decide for your TTOs, right? So you might have many of these kind of policies, intellectual property policy. You may have a separate tech transfer policy, depends on your institutions. There might be a revenue sharing policy that may be part of your tech transfer policy. I've kept it separate because some organizations have a revenue sharing policy for other activities also, like consulting and so on, which is wider sometimes, but there is a revenue sharing policy associated with tech transfer as well, right? Then there might be a faculty or startup or a spin-out venture creation policy, especially dealing with equity models if it's applicable to you as an institution. There might be faculty entrepreneurship policies, and along with it will come some amount of conflict of interest and commitment kind of policies, right? And finally, some student entrepreneurship policies as well, right? And different organizations have taken a different view on these policies as well. Okay, so first thing is, every policy, in my view, the most important section is the guiding principle that you start with. Okay, like Richard spoke specifically from Cornell's point of view. Okay, I just want to give you a slightly different perspective as well. So if you look at how policies are implemented, you will see that there is a high level policy, and then it's rolled down into a strategy of how you will achieve whatever you want to achieve and given those policies, right? And then there are institutional mechanisms and some enabling resources. So what I mean by those, say an IP policy, right? A strategy of how you suppose your institution lays out a strategy that in the first 2 years we're just going to build a pipeline of technologies which are patented. And the next 2 years, we are going to try and see how we can strengthen our TTO operations. There's a strategy around it, right, and how we want to go about it. There might be strategy around what is our priority, right, which we want to focus. Maybe this area, I want to create a portfolio in this particular sector versus another particular sector. For example, NCL, for many years, we have built a portfolio around hydrogen energy, okay, and that's been an effort to do that. Now there is of course a strategy around it, right, that we think, and this by the way is long before today. So for the last 15 years, 20 years we are working on it over a period of time, right? Institutional mechanisms have to do like invention disclosure flows. I mean that he showed you the flow that the workflows that are involved, which again are important, and enabling resources are pockets of funds, people taking decisions, all of those which fit in as well. I just want to give you a little bit of a contrast of why it matters. So I have 3 columns here. First one is academia, second one is government R&D labs, and the third is like production focused R&D labs like DRDO and ISRO, right? Here's my view of what their priorities are, right? I've taken the same 6 goals and rearranged it for them, right? Just so that you understand that it's not the same for everybody, right? So for academia, the first one might be teaching and dissemination of knowledge, right? All of you agree? Okay, right? New knowledge generation, research training, that's PhD training comes along with that as well. Create know-how, inventions, technology options, maybe manage some resource centers, right? Maybe support industry offering services, and maybe taking it all the way till the end. Like sometimes there is an expectation that we should enhance the TRL levels, take it all the way till the end, especially the institutes of technology face a lot of expectations of that kind as well, right? On the other hand, you look at DRDOs, right? The first one is production R&D, right? It's basically get a manufacturing ready technology out of the door, right? That's how they think. ISRO is of that kind, right? They may have some technologies which they can give to others which are a little early TRLs, but they are not, their priority is this, okay? And you'll also see maybe some managing certain collections, capabilities and all of that, which are strategically important for them to function, they will do that. But definitely teaching is not high on their priority list, right? In fact, here neither is research training either, okay? So it's a different type of a research institution that one is talking about, okay? And by the way, in all of this, income comes nowhere. They tell you, but it's not a priority of the organization, right? Am I right? Right? After all, that's the organizational goal. This may be told to you that tech transfer, do this, but it's not a high priority as far as the organization is concerned, right? And on CSIR fits somewhere here in between, right? So NCL, CCMB, not all CSIR by the way, some CSIR labs fit here, but many CSIR labs like NCL, CCMB are little closer to the academia. So their priorities are new knowledge generation, research training. So they have very active PhD programs, right? You'll see creation of new know-how, inventions, technology options. Then maybe manage resource centers. Like for example, NCL has a very strong collection of industrial microorganisms, right? Which is very popular, okay? So the priorities are different. We don't do much of undergraduate teaching, right, as NCL, or postgraduate teaching for that matter either, right? And to some degree, we are expected to do this when we say, oh, translate the whole thing till a demonstration plant and show that, you know, for a company, right, and transfer it, high tier electric. So the goals are very different, and your policies need to be aligned to those goals. And it shows up in the guiding principles. That's what I'm coming to, okay? So here is MIT's guiding principle, okay? Which I've taken it from a slightly older document, which is about 2010, because that time it was available. I mean, right now they don't put it out there. But you will actually say here that it says, for example, let me just read it out for you, right? The first line says, the prompt and open dissemination of results of MIT research and the free exchange of information among scholars are essential to MIT's obligations, right? And then later it says, technology transfer is however subordinate to the education and research. The dissemination of information must therefore not be delayed beyond. That's what Richard talked about as well, right? That's that philosophy, right? That's their objective. Now, and of course there's this famous quote from Lita Nelson talking about impact and not income being the goal, okay, of a tech transfer office. Now this is a CSIR policy which came out. This is by the way a little old because I haven't found a later one, but read this one, right? This goes back to almost I think 99, right? To maximize the benefits to CSIR from its intellectual capital by stimulating higher levels of innovation through a judicious system of rewards, ensuring timely and effective legal protection for its IP and forging strategic alliances for enhancing the value of its IP. Right? You can see the contrast. Okay, so this is the basic principle on which you first start, right? What is the organizational's guiding principle, and then build your IP around it, your policy around it. Otherwise, you will get it all muddled up. So please don't copy policies blindly from one institution to another. It's not a good idea. Okay, that's the message out here. Okay, let's continue. A little bit on policies and procedures. This you will find online, you can read later, but there are detailed policy documents which are available. The most recent one is available, for example, for MIT, but there are different parts to this which I have tried to just list here so that you can later have a look. There are policy statements on the top. Then you see that there are some guidelines around technology evaluation, protection, dissemination. There's commercial development after that, and obligations of faculty, students, staff, visitors, all of that, and how it will be administered. Broadly, the parts of a policy document that one is talking about. This, by the way, incidentally, is the CSIR's internal policy. It's not available publicly, okay? So I can't show you anything here, but this is the kind of documents that people have typically over there as well. So what are the elements of an IP and a tech transfer policy? By the way, first thing I wanted to point out is policy, the guiding principle is different from the guidelines, okay? Once, if it's well aligned, it works well. If it's not aligned well, so there's a responsibility for you to ensure that your policies are written up well and aligned to organizational goals. Otherwise, we often find disputes between the leadership of the TTO and the leadership of the organization trying to understand. I mean, one expectation is different. And by the other rule is, please write it up. Don't keep it ambiguous, because directors change, vice chancellors change, their orientation changes, politics changes. You want to keep a steady ship if you want to have a written up document per se. Okay, so when you design your policies, you are essentially designing in order to ensure that you achieve those intended outcomes. So you should be clear what those outcomes are and incentivize the participation of everybody. So for example, in your institution, if you want people to contribute invention disclosures, what are your options? You can go and say that it's mandatory, right? And that we will screen every document before it leaves the institution, right? By the way, in many institutions that's like death blow, because that's not acceptable, okay? They will not do that. But a DRDO can do that, okay? But in an academic institution, you will not be able to do that, okay? So people, if they might stop even responding, or the students might think that it's too much, it's intervention in their progress and so on. So in fact, we have seen this, that the volume of invention disclosures drops if the messaging is wrong, okay? And we have seen this in NCL as well, okay? We had a situation where one of the DGs spoke out against IP and so on, and immediately we had a drop in a fall, and we had a fall in the IP submissions, invention disclosure submissions. So it's important to have the messaging right. Creating legitimacy is another thing. So there are so for example, if I say that that we as a research organization, one of our core goals is to see that technology reaches the end point, right? That is, we are making it part of the policy and core to our activities. There will be somebody else, by the way, recently we got a question from an institution who was crafting their policies, asking, they brought in the admin guys and they were asking, isn't this a commercial activity, right? And therefore, can it be done by a not-for-profit entity? That's a question, okay? So how should it be structured such that a commercial activity is being done by a not-for-profit entity? So our argument was that it's not a commercial activity, okay? Because your objectives are to actually still disseminate knowledge, right? Take the results of knowledge to that, and that has to be conveyed. But the finance guys are more interested in tax implications of that. So that's the reason they're asking that question, right? So you understand, you're creating legitimacy by writing the right sentences in your policy documents, okay? It has to be clear, minimize ambiguity. That's where all the disputes happen. The moment you create it moment it's very ambiguous. That does not mean you detail everything. It just has to be clear, right? You also want it to be easily implementable. So some understanding of how it's going to be implemented is useful. So for example, if you're doing it in an academic institution, you should know what is the approval process that it's going to go through, who is going to have a view, and from what point of view. So in an IIT, the Senate is quite powerful, okay? So the Senates have to take a view on it, right? In a CSIR kind of organization, it might be the director and maybe at best the research council or management council that has a view. But the director has, so you have to understand and align with what is likely to go through. So you have to talk to those people as well and understand how you will take it ahead as well. So I think the rest is quite clear as well, so I don't need to spend much time there. And these are a few other points which I think I will let you cover. Aravind, I think I've come to this part of it, so here. So I'll let Dr. Chinchure cover this segments, which is more on policies and processes and some elements of it as well. So I think I have more or less.
Good afternoon. Since morning I'm seeing so much is happening. Richard, good to see you after a long time. I used to see you at STEM. I think, Ashley, you must have forgotten we met at STEM. And I remember Ashley taking the STEM event happened in Kharadi, a little bit away from Pune. And he wanted to see Pune, and I took him to Jangli Maharaj Road and FC Road and lanes and by-lanes in between for a dinner. So good to see you, both of you, and your commitment to India and spending so much of time. So thank you, Premnath and then Silventure Center for giving me this opportunity. I know time is very less. I might have to go a little bit faster, but you will get something, possibly you can use it in your journey of building tech transfer ecosystem. I'm using ecosystem. Now, generally people say, why do we need policy? Or what is this policy is all about? Just remember that this is like a invisible architectural blueprint that you have to create. It is invisible. So what does this mean? What it means is, for example, I want to build a home or office or 10-floor building. You must have a design. You must have a blueprint. You must also know what are those building codes that require to bring into that blueprint. And third is you must also know that I'm building on a right place that I own. Just imagine if that does not exist, you are going to create a massive chaos. So therefore, policy is something that brings clarity. I think just what Premnath said, this brings clarity. But clarity is not just enough. We need certain certainty, certain predictability in everything that TTO does as a part of their role. So I still remember, I think Dr. Premnath referred to Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, though you did not discuss. I'm an alumnus of TIFR. So 15 years back or 14 years back, I was invited to give a talk as a part of an alumni event. Unfortunately, there were 3 directors, one current director and past 2 directors. And of course, there were a lot of scientists and alumni. So I spoke about importance of translational research, and you know that TIFR is such a premier research institute. So importance, and I gave some example, Richard, about MIT, for example, and some professors and institutions, how they work about doing the translational research. My talk was received well, and I just finished the talk, and one of the former director, I still remember Professor S.S. Jha, theoretical physicist, he said, Aravind, what you said is correct, but we need a mindset, we need a culture. This is very, very important in case you want to really, really build that ecosystem for a translation research and technology transfer. Then something very interesting happens. Then a young faculty, very young faculty, when he used to publish in some of the top journals in the world, he said, Aravind, you said, and I agree what you said, but tell me, how do I start? Where do I start? Where do I begin? See, this is the fundamental challenge that exists in the institution. Where do I begin? How do I begin? And what do I do? And do I have a visibility for that? I think that's where policy and processes play a very, very, very critical role in building ecosystem for technology transfer. I know some of you are kind of experienced in technology transfer because you are part of a tech transfer offices, and some of you are beginning the journey of creating tech transfer office. So let me now give what are those policies that you want to have in your institutions. This is a comprehensive list. Dr. Premnath gave that list, and this can be in couple of documents, or it could be separate policy documents, depending on how you want to structure. And it also very important that your policy has to be aligned to the stage or evolution or a journey that you are in. Don't try to, as Dr. Premnath said, copy MIT's or CSIR's policy and try to implement. That does not work. So the first and fundamental building block in policy, or first thing that you want to have, is IP policy. This is the most important policy document that you must have as an institution. Even if you may not have a tech transfer office, but you must, or technology transfer policy, but the first and most important policy that you want to bring in is IP policy. What does this IP policy cover? It covers ownership, protection, and management of IP, because that's the fundamental thing that you want to have in place, because that's the pipeline, that's the flow that you want to capture. Like a scientist or a staff or a student has an idea, has a new research which has a potential. I, as a scientist, as a researcher, I must know what do I do, where do I go, and therefore what you heard from Richard, what you heard from Dr. Premnath is about invention disclosure to begin with. Now we say, all of us, we know invention disclosure, but where that invention disclosure should be, in what form, is it accessible, what happens after someone submits the invention disclosure, what do we do, how fast do we respond, how do we evaluate, how do we take a decision about that invention, should we file, not to file, when to file, not to, all kinds of things. So capturing that invention, the policy for that, protection, and the management. I think that's the fundamental thing that you want to have as a part of a IP policy. I'm going a little bit faster. So I did work for a World Bank, and my job was to help universities in South Asian countries how they can write and define and create policies in the country for various institutions. This is the document that I created. Of course, this is too much. I will not get into it, but this is a document to create policies within the institutions. So now next, now that I have a policy for capturing new inventions, evaluating and managing, the next is going to be about tech transfer. But before we get into this, because this is going to be a very boring topic, right? Policies are very boring. Let me illustrate the power of IP policy. So Dr. Premnath quickly, he went through this slide. Look at National Chemical Laboratory communicated their policy Of course, they eventually created a very comprehensive policy, but the first commitment to the policy and the direction to the policy came from Dr. Mashelkar. And of course, you will hear tomorrow Dr. Hirwani, several case studies. Listen to him. He is the pioneer in this particular space. And what he did in 1989, India was not yet economically liberalized. 1989, Dr. Mashelkar took over as the director of a national chemical laboratory, and he gave a message in the first day of his starting that position, that leadership. First day he addressed entire staff of NCL, National Chemical Laboratory, and what he said is very, very profound. What he said is that our current paradigm is publish or perish, and all of us will know who are in the science. And then he said, henceforth, in 1989, 1st July, if I remember, he said that we have to move from this paradigm of publish or perish to patent, publish, and prosper. And now, as a leader, as a director, he's communicating so clearly on the day one of his office. Now, things has to change and changed. And I will give this example because this is what I found it, because Dr. Premnath and I and many of CSIR worked with Dr. Shivram. Now Dr. Shivram, who became later Director of National Chemical Laboratory, he started filing patents on polycarbonates, polycondensation of polycarbonate. He created a portfolio. See, 89, this happened, and remember this is somewhere 1994, the first US patent policy was defined, and first patent came in 1994. And then what happened? It's a history, the real example what can happen in India. There are many things that can happen over 25 years. So they had some 25, over a period of time, they had 25 portfolio of patents in this particular area. And what was the licensing revenue at that time, early 90s? Licensing revenue for royalties and licensing for NCL was close to $15 million. $15 million. And that's not all about. Because of this work, GE, which was the leader in I worked in GE. GE was the number one in plastics and polycarbonate industry, and they thought that how can a scientist or an institution in India can build a portfolio on our space, our product line, where they were spending billions of dollars. And eventually, GE has to come, license the technology. Along with GE, many institutions came, and the first GE's R&D center was established in Bangalore. The trigger is here. So that's the power of having a leader communicating the policy, having a policy, and motivating and creating that culture so that you build that the direction and execute and make things happen. Of course, Dr. Hirwani will talk more about this. Now that I have created invention, or I have now series of patents in different stages as a portfolio, the next important policy guidelines, which is a rule book or a constitution that you need to have, is my tech transfer policy. Now that I have a technology, now I need to have a policy and direction for technology transfer. That's the next step that comes into the policy. And of course, there are multiple things that can go into this policy. You will hear from both Richard, Ashley, and many others. But fundamentally, this should guide you on the entire process towards commercialization or valorization pathway. So, for example, many times, I think this is a favorite of Dr. Premnath, he always says, because we sit on certain committees, he always says that, for example, have a policy guideline to support internal inventors to start their own, say, venture. And for this, don't make your policy so stringent that they are not able to really create that spin-off. And once they create a spin-off, if they lack that ownership, complete ownership, they will not be able to raise money and build the company. So you need to have that kind of a flexibility built in for giving the priority to your own internal staff to translate or spin off. And at that time, the kind of a flexibility you bring in is extremely, extremely important. I'm just rushing, but we can, have a separate discussion on this, and you have 1 week to learn more about this. So let me give an example. So I was in Cambridge. I was part of an international advisory board meeting. And a professor in Cambridge, Frank, we finished our advisory meeting, and we were supposed to do a big concluding conference. I said, Frank, whom are we inviting as a keynote speaker? He said, we will invite Sir Greg Winter. I said, what's so special about Professor Winter, Greg Winter? He said he's a Nobel laureate, but has created several ventures, billion-dollar ventures, and also has a licensing revenue close to £1 billion. Now, just imagine that if something like this has to happen, possibly, in early 90s, Dr. Shivram proved that we can do licensing or royalties in this thing for $15 million. Possibly, we have people or potential to create these kind of a scientists who not only excel in science, but translate their science into technology and create ventures and create licensing revenue of tune to $1 billion. So he founded 2 unicorn companies, billion-dollar companies. Of course, these are exceptions, but this will help us understand why this is required and what is possible, and the role all of us we can play to make that happen. So therefore, it's extremely important. Now, what is it that we can learn from this? Fundamentally, there was a policy for a technology transfer, and of course, getting those licensing fees. There was a whole structure, the policy that existed, but there was also a policy in place for spinouts, because here Professor Gregory Winter, he was also an entrepreneur. As a professor in Cambridge, he was also an entrepreneur, and there has to be a policy for spinout company. And this is a very exciting part, Richard, right? This exciting because this is a powerful pathway for you to incentivize inventors. And we discuss this again and again. If there is no incentive, you will not have a pipeline of inventions. You will not have a technology that gets disclosed and part of your portfolio, right? One of that which you can put this as a part of an IP policy or tech transfer policy or together, but it's very, very important that you need to have a revenue sharing policy, whatever we call it, revenue sharing policy, where you must know clearly, or the inventors, the staff or a scientist and researcher, they know how much compensation, I will get incentivized. Say, for example, in this revenue sharing is, I'm not going too much, but see, one is generally, commonly, formula is you remove the expenses, you have certain profit or net profit or whatever generation, and out of which 40 to 60%, depending on what you want to do, that percentage goes to inventors, right? Or that, then you can also decide what part of the overall profit or revenue you want to give it to your institution and you give it to your department, right? These are the three major components. If it's a center should get some money. And then you can also have a policy how they are going to spend that money, right? Suppose £1 billion that Cambridge received from one professor, they should know how they are going to invest and where they are going to invest. The whole philosophy here is that we do research, translate it, have a technology, license it, and part of that goes to, of course, inventor, and then it has to plow back into the institutional research or department's research. It's not for, I will use it for travel or something. So that kind of a clarity you need to bring in this policy, revenue sharing policy. The fourth one is and I think this is for me is the more exciting part, spinouts. Because these are the powerful pathways for you to take this technology and create that impact, the whatever outcome that you want to, intended to achieve. Spinouts are the most powerful, most potent pathway to make that happen. So this we should have, suppose I'm the researcher, I have done the research, and I see the potential of this research into a new venture, or I want to be part of that new venture. What should be the systems and processes for that researcher to become an entrepreneur? So that's very, very, this is where spin out of whatever. And if you go to US, whether it's MIT or Cornell, many students who work with the professor, one of their agendas will be to see whether some of the work that is happening in the lab can get converted into a new venture. And student will start the new venture, professor becomes a guide or advisor, scientific advisor, and all kinds of things. So that is a very, very important pathway that exists for us, but unfortunately in India it is not common. Barring, I think we have examples in NCL Venture Center. NCL scientists starting their own company based on the research they did in the NCL. But a lot that can be done because we are the third largest startup ecosystem. We have these incubators like NCL Venture Center. Possibly this is the best time for us to have students and professors creating their own ventures, and we have a policy for that. And not only the policy licensing, how we are going to do, but also can we support them. Like Venture Center supports them in looking at their business plan, looking at can they get more grants, BIRAC and so on, then how they can get the mentorship so that they can go to the next step in this. This is a conflict of interest policy. I will come to that. That's the last one. I know I want to go faster, but still.
Usually we read, you have mentioned more about the spin-outs, but usually what we hear is about startups only.
Yes.
Not spin-offs that often.
Correct.
So what's the reason you have not mentioned startups here, but you have mentioned spin-outs?
So spin-outs are nothing but startup, new ventures.
Okay.
It is going to be new venture. It's a startup.
So
For somebody who has created the technology within the lab and wants to start a new company. That's a spin-out. Spin-out is nothing but whatever work that I'm doing in the lab spins out into a new venture. That's what we call it spin-out. And here especially because you have done the work in the lab, you are the better person to translate this into a technology and a new business. I think, yeah.
startup
See, startup is in general, we call it any new venture as a startup, which is based on innovation. It's a risk.
the lab is spin-off.
Yes. From the lab, from my own work, I'm translating this. I'm the best person, right, as a researcher to
Sir,
translate.
sometimes there is also mentioned, I read somewhere, spin-out's life is mostly 4 to 5 years, or it's only few of the spin-offs work well?
It's like any other startup. Now, any new venture, I think, because
that's fine.
Dr. Premnath has several spin-offs. I think, what is your experience?
So, just think of it this way. The largest superset here is new businesses. In that, startups is a smaller group, which consists of those which are fast growing, they're forward looking, there's innovation, there is a future business opportunity that they're looking at. And in that, if it has drawn something from a university environment or another institution of any kind, you're spinning it out from that. So it's a new entity which is of a startup nature, which is spun out from a particular thing. All these issues of life and so on and so forth have to just do with whether they succeed or not, right? So there are thumb rules. People track, for example, a success of a startup saying that, oh, did they survive 5 years and so on. But those are just measures that people are using. So don't go by that necessarily. Did you want to comment?
Yes.
Did you want to comment?
Yeah, in the US, we tend to use the terms spin out and start up interchangeably, as Aravind said. In Europe, they make a clear distinction. A spin out is if there is intellectual property owned by the institution that is licensed to the company. That's a spin out. A startup is if a professor has a knowledge in an area and says, I think we could do this. And instead of doing it in his academic lab, he does it in a company. So it's based on his know-how, but no intellectual property from the institution.
Yes.
Okay. I think that's a helpful distinction.
I agree.
I wish we made that distinction in the US. We don't. In Europe, they do.
Sure. Thank you. I think you can continue.
Yes. Yes. Yes, please. I know lunch will be late. It's okay. We have to have some activity also. But yeah.
So this actually scheme was started by DSIR to implement the spin-offs by researchers, and so basically these schemes is for IITs, ISERs, and universities and CSIR.
Yes.
So I know about CSIR.
Yes.
So can you tell me something success stories out of CSIR or universities and IITs like?
Correct. Anya, I think he's a co-founder. Being a scientist of NCL, he has spun off a company.
That, we take it up. There's a section on venturing, which Ashley will first lead, and after that we have a session on the Indian perspective. I think it's day 3 or day 4. So we'll do it at that time.
Fine.
We have actual examples to show you as well, and also what are the problems that people face. Yeah.
Fine. Thank you.
So I could have shared the detail, but I think we'll have a separate session. Yes. So let's go fast because I know Premnath comes here means rush. So now let me give another example from MIT. Kind of a superstar, right? You know, he sometimes is on the front page of a Boston Globe magazine and so on. It's a Robert Langer, and very interesting. He is one of the great examples one can study. I mean, he has a Harvard Business Review case study on him, how he makes these spin-outs happen and how he becomes an entrepreneur. So just look at Bob Langer's credentials. Bob Langer's credentials are that he has close to 1,600 research papers. 45 of them are in Nature and Science. Then he has almost 1,500 patents as an inventor, co-inventor of this. And his patents have been licensed or sub-licensed to over 400 pharmaceutical, chemical, and biotechnological and medical devices companies. In fact, I always teach, his lab, Bob Langer's lab's statement is, I don't want to do research for the sake of research, but for the translation research. That's the purpose. And I want to do research on the world's biggest problems. It's very interesting what you said, Richard, about the impact. That's how he started. Now, just look at the numbers. And this is a recent article that I pulled up. What is the valuation of the companies, or how many companies exist active today? and what is the valuation of those companies, and you will be surprised to know that, of course, it's a very good to see Edison of medicine, and his H index is 230. So 20 is very good. And but this last sentence, if you should, the Langer's lab discoveries have translated into both clinical and commercial success. His lab has given rise to 40 companies. 40 companies, 39 of them either acquired or still in existence with a collective market cap or collective market value of $50 billion. One lab in MIT can create this kind of an impact. It's not just about the money. 40 companies creating the jobs, creating wealth for the nation. Just imagine, and helping the patients, because most of his work is to treat something. So he works with doctors and so on. That's the kind of an impact. Now, if someone has to make this kind of a impact, you need to have systems and processes and policies and so on. This is just, now later what I did was, 5 to 7. Another search I did, what is his net worth, personal net worth? He is in the top richest, like 700, one of the, if you have to list down the top 700 richest people in the world, he's one among them. Because of many other things. So let me go fast. So one we said spin out, but next is faculty entrepreneurship or student entrepreneurship. Spin out here, Ashley clearly said that there is an IP that gets translated and I create a company or a new venture. Now entrepreneurs can also become, researchers can also want to become entrepreneur. There has to be a policy for that, right? Students want to become an entrepreneur. They may not be taking IP generated from their lab, but they may have something, their own knowledge, or they will get something, but they want to become an entrepreneur. For example, someone has the ability to do consulting. It's a kind of a entrepreneurial venture, or they will have some other ideas. Then there has to be policy for students if students want to become an entrepreneur or a faculty wants to become an entrepreneur. Very clear guidelines, what kind of approvals and everything that needs for a faculty to become an entrepreneur, and also provide the platform to support that entrepreneur through incubation, grants, and many other things. So that's also very, very important. The last one is conflict of interest. Now, why conflict of interest? See, one side we are saying that more and more inventions has to come, gets translated, and one of the ways that can translate is through spin out and entrepreneurship. But let's imagine that a researcher or a faculty, his core job is either to teach and research or teach, and his most of the time goes into a commercial venture or a venture. What will happen to the institution? So there has to be clarity about such conflict of interest. You are hired for this, we encourage you to do it, but to what extent? So identifying what are those conflict of interest, assessing and seeing what could be the solution for that, and how do we manage. And that's the conflict of interest policy, and we deal this, Dr. Premnath and I, sometimes we deal this particular problem in real life. So have that conflict of interest policy in place. Now I will go just fast. So now processes, it's not just about policy, you need to have a processes, and I will take only 5 minutes. See, what is policy? Policy talks about what and why, but that's not good enough. You need to know how. That how part gets converted into processes, and the process brings the efficiency into the system. It is like an engine, which is a well-oiled engine, components are well maintained so that you achieve that efficiency. But I will just take maybe one slide and quickly go through the next. So now if you look at the entire value chain from idea to say commercialization, what are the processes that you need to have in place in your institution? Say let's take, here is an idea and eventually we commercialize. Now, what are the things you first start? Okay, now you need to ensure if there is idea, is getting into proof of concept, early stage of proof of concept, can I have an invention disclosure? There has to be a process to capture that invention disclosure. There has to be a process for faculty members to see that. Then after this invention disclosure, there has to be evaluation, prior art search. These are the checks and balances. So what process that exists for evaluating those invention disclosure? Richard said only 50% will go through for a patent. Then what happens is first filing decision. There has to be a process. After that, full filing provisional application, then patent full specification, and then there is a foreign filing decision, the process, and then filing foreign. When you are into technology development, you will have more ideas, and from here, continuation application, because you want to create a portfolio so that you have a better chance to transfer the technology and make money. So you need to have processes. So for creation part of technology, you need to have invention disclosure process, initial assessment, consulting and talking and having discussion with researcher. You need to have a process for protection. How do you evaluate that invention? Process for prior art, who is going to do inside, outside, strategy development, should we keep it trade secret, or first filing, provisional application, full application, and who is going to do, how we are going to do filing and prosecution. There has to be a process for that. Once we do this, commercialization. So the process for marketing and outreach. You need to have a process for confidential matter, because I'm talking now to a third party. You do have a process. How do you manage that? How do you evaluate partners, doing due diligence, and then eventually process for negotiation and agreement, right? So, and spin-out support if it's happening from inside. So next, and final, many times we don't do it, is we need to have a closing and impact. So our focus is about impact, and how are we monitoring that impact? How much is the impact? For example, I'm evaluating that impact and reporting. I'm ensuring that the revenue collection happens and distribution happens. And of course, you need to look at monitoring and compliance. I know this was too much for such a short thing, but I am sure you must have had the glance of the kind of policy documents or policies that you need to put in place in the institutions. We gave 7. And then the processes that you need to have. So then you have what, you have why, and how. And if that happens, you are the most efficient and high impact TTO office. Yes.
So you had mentioned that for the faculty and the students can commercialize their own invention.
Yes.
Yes, sir. So I just want to ask that it is related to Baydole Act of USA, I think. But in India, I don't remember exact year, but in India it was discarded in the parliament by saying that it will lead to, what I can say, the faculty will be more interested in their own money making rather than the growth of the institution or something.
So it's a long story, but Baydole Act is more on the ownership of IP that gets generated in an institution, which is funded by other parties. That's about Baydole Act. Of course, you will get to hear more about Baydole if you want. India, it has gone into multiple versions, but I think,
yes,
Premnath, you may.
The short answer is it's not relevant to most institutions in India, because ownership anyway rests with the institutions. It doesn't rest with the government. In the US, that is how it originated. You want to briefly mention?
So my review of the proposed Indian Baydole Act was that it had some very negative aspects to it, and I was not disappointed when it was withdrawn, okay? Now, we needed the Baydole Act in the US because the government said, well, we fund the research, we own the IP, and they did nothing with it. And Baydole gave the IP back to the universities, okay? Yes. You don't have to do it that way. Canada doesn't have a Baydole Act. And in Canada, it's institution by institution, the policy. In about half of the Canadian institutions, the policy says the inventor owns his own IP. Okay? And in the other institutions, the other half, the institution owns the IP. So you don't necessarily need a government, a national law. It can be done through policy.
So 5 minutes to 1.
No, that's fine. Can we do the exercise? You're done?
I'm done.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I think I'll let Vidula handle that exercise. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Yeah, thanks everyone. So this exercise is basically to understand, as Dr. Chinchure has rightly put in, the blueprint of what your organizations are having in terms of how your policies are placed. So what we have done is we've put a few questions. So the link has already been shared on your WhatsApp group. If you all could please open the link. So I'll display the questions here. There are total 9 questions that will be happening. So, and after that we have also shared you all one document like this, which is there in your exercise notebooks that you'll have received. So this we will be filling up after your questions have been added. So you have just 2 minutes, looking at the time that we are eating into your lunch time. Post that I'll be displaying all the results, responses here. We'll have a quick discussion on that, and then we will go to the action point that has been written as hard book. Yes. Yes, yes. So we just have 2 minutes to go. I'll just display all the questions here, so we can quickly do that.
Open it? Yeah? Okay.
It's
So
accessible,
we'll
everyone
explain-
has received?
We'll first
Yeah.
explain, yeah.
Yeah. So the learning goals of this exercise is how your organization is placed in terms of what is the view of your TTO, whether your organization policies are adequate for your needs. If you have any key institutional processes in place, then how the decisions are made in your organization. Understand funding and resourcing status in your organization, and overall the layout of the few action points and further decisions and improvements. So this we will do at the end, the last one. So I'll just move on to all the questions. So here, as it is already said, the rule has already been set.
Can I just
Yeah.
talk briefly about it? I have my mic.
Okay.
So try to be honest in answering. Don't try to say what your organization would like to hear. Okay? So this is just there's something called a Chatham House rules. That is that whatever you say here, nobody will say that you said it in this meeting. So just be honest in this exercise. If things are not the way it is, say so. Don't make it up. Okay? That's the rule. Next. Yeah, continue.
So I've already given all these briefs before. So the first question is, how important is tech transfer to your organization's mission? The second question is, where is your organization in the TTO positioned? So you have options in the form which have already been added. Which of the following policies does your institute have in place? Which of the following agreements have been implemented in your institution? Which of the following formats are used in your institution? If you all don't understand anything, please point it out to us. We'll explain it here. Which of the following functions are adequately staffed in your institutions? Which of the following decisions are made effectively in a well-informed manner at your institution? And the last one is, which of the responsibilities of taking investment? Who has the responsibility of taking the investment or deal closure decisions in your institution? And do you have earmarked or dedicated funds for the following in your institutions or related organizations? Suppose this, we will be filling up the hard copy that has been, you all have received already.
Any problems in filling it up, let us
Yeah.
know. But I think you should, everybody is able to open it? Yeah? Just,
Yeah, I'll just move to the responses.
after they start filling
Yeah.
it. Just 2 minutes. Can you keep it back on the form?
Okay.
Anybody having difficulty opening it or filling it up? You're yet to finish, isn't it, Kaushik? Yeah. Okay. Others can look at the form that we are being given, which has been given to you, based on. You're also done. Yeah. You can. We'll also discuss this later, but first let's just. Yeah. This one just says policies, agreements, forms, and. Iske next slide, dekho. Yeah. We'll just come back. Yeah. So. you've, those questions which were given to you were different categories. Sorry? Yeah, just to give. So we'll be requesting you to write down what you think you could be doing, which you are not doing already. Okay?
Anyone else?
Can we can just go to the questions? Maybe Pragnya can handle that, yeah. Okay, answers?
Yeah.
Okay, now let's look at what many of you have put. There are 24 responses. So is anybody not done yet? Oh, they're there. Okay. So the first one is alignment with organizational mission. So is tech transfer the number 1 goal, number 2 goal, or among the top 5 goals? Is desirable but not necessary. So we have a split between number 1 goal and top 5 goals. Okay. So, and there are some who believe it's desirable but not necessary. Okay. So there is a, I'm happy that you are thinking through this process, but just keep this in mind as, yeah, go ahead next. Okay. Where in your organization is your TTO positioned? The head TTO reports to Dean R&D sponsored research, or the head TTO reports to the director, vice chancellor, head TTO reports to the head of administration, registrar. We do not have a dedicated TTO and other, right? You can see a lot of them are reporting to the director or the vice chancellor. That might indicate that that's seen as a strategic activity, or it's a small organization where everybody reports to the director. Either of those are possible, but hopefully it's the first one, right? But there are also several who are reporting to Dean R&D, especially the academic probably organizations, and we have a little bit of many CSIR organizations here, so I think probably that's why this is a little higher. But I would expect that in an academic organization, many would be reporting here. But there are some organizations where, like as Richard said, reporting to the head of finance or so on and so forth. That also does happen in some organizations. Okay, and in many cases the TTO may not be there. It might be part of a loose part of another organization as well. Next. Which of the following policies does your institution have in place, right? So the first one was an intellectual property policy. Oh, interesting, it's just declining as you go along. Okay, so everybody seems to have an intellectual property policy, most of them. Tech transfer policy, yes. Revenue sharing policy is even lesser. By the way, in some, there has been a recent stoppage of certain revenue sharing activities in CSR institutions, so maybe in that context some have removed it. But startup, spin out, venture creation, there are about half this class seems to have as a policy, right? Faculty entrepreneurship policy only 9, conflict of interest commitment policies 8, and student entrepreneurship policies 5. I can understand in some CSIR labs there are no undergraduate or grad students. I think CFTRI has master's students, but PhD students are treated comparable to staff, so it is not necessarily, may not come under this, so they may not have a policy as well. But what happens if, say, such a situation arises, right? A student wants to start a company, say a PhD student wants to start a company in a CSI lab. What will you do? Anybody? While they are doing their PhD. Is that allowed?
I think as per their funding guidelines, it is not allowed. But if they are not getting a funding from, say, central body like CSIR or UGC,
Yeah.
then it may be allowed as a progressive policy.
Yeah, repeat that.
So I wanted to say, as a part of funding body guidelines, for example, they get net scholarship and the other venturing is not allowed, to the best I know. And as a part of progressive policy, if they are not getting a fellowship from such thing, they should be allowed.
Okay, so he's right. Some of the documents which lay out the rules for the fellowship, okay, basically require them to be full-time working on their research, right? So that's the reason that it is not typically done. But undergrads and all, in institutions, that's a different ball game. They are not obligated in the same way, right? Undergrad students and so on. So if they are paying a fee for studies, they are not obligated to do that. They can, in principle, do all of that, right? Okay. Which of the following agreements have been implemented in your institutions, right? This is getting a little bit cut off. Can you show me the full question? Or yeah? Yeah.
The questions tab in the same form.
Or you can go to the slide.
Okay.
Or just go to the slide. You can go to the slide, please. Further down. Yeah. So assignment of IP rights by employees to the institutions. Do all of you have it? Some didn't seem to have put it there. Right. Anyway, can I just see that again? Yeah. No, just go back to the questions only first. Yeah. And stay there only. Don't change, please. Yeah. Okay. Confidentiality agreements with employees, agreements on confidentiality and IP with visiting or transient researchers, agreements on confidentiality and IP ownership with collaborators, joint invention agreements in case of collaborations, NDAs, CDAs with interested industry partners, collaborators, and MTAs as in material transfer agreements for exchange of samples and data, right? So now let's look at the results. Okay. So there are 16 who say that IP assignment, right? But there are institutions like who have not built it into their agreements with their employees, right? Of IP being assigned to the institutions. So that is one more thing that some of you might want to check, right? Where is it assigned, right? Sometimes it's in the employment agreement. Confidentiality agreements is something which again, I don't know if many of you have even seen it, right? For example, are you bound by confidentiality? Go and see, maybe your appointment letters, you'll get to see some of that. Also for transient workers and so on and so forth. In many institutions, students coming, going, collaborators coming, going, you don't have any arrangements in place to understand what to do with the IP that's created with them, right? That's another gap area in many institutions. You may want to think through that also, right? And when the situation arises, you don't want to be running around trying to sort it out. You need a mechanism in place. Also there are situations when you're working with other research institutions and researchers will start a collaboration impromptu, like they'll find two scientists getting together and start it. At what point do you decide what should be the terms of IP? And what should be the clauses, right? If you create joint IP, what will you do, right? And of course, when you're talking to industry, do you sign NDAs? Do you have mechanisms to do all of that? Or material transfer agreements, have you set up mechanisms to do that? Are you having, so it's not bad actually, we have 16, 15 doing it currently. But there are those who may not be doing it, so you may want to add that to your exercise here of these are the things we should be doing, right? Next. Yeah. Following formats, invention disclosure formats. Actually, I'm surprised it's 20. I think it should have been everybody. Nobody has? Most of you must be having, okay? And informing about seeking permission to create a new venture. So if somebody wants to create a new venture, there will be a permission at some point to create it, right, which somebody will have to take. That is, by the way, something like the SES that you talked about. I think you asked that question, right, about scientist entrepreneurship scheme. So that's this form, for example, or disclosure for potential conflict of interest or conflict of commitments, which again, there is a mechanism in several institutions of reporting that as well. So this is, again, you can see many don't have these two, and you may need to sort of put that in place, and if there are instances of ventures being created. If you don't have those, then it may not be critical at this point. Next. Which of these functions are adequately staffed in your institutions? So you will notice many Indian institutions just focus on the IP filing, prosecution and portfolio management, right? The decisions and decision support that could involve some amount of analytics, some amount of thinking through how to take that decision, creating background notes, that's little lower. There is some amount of marketing, since all of us are here from the TTO kind of activities, that is there. This is there in more. So deal structuring, closing the deal, you have a lot more activity very often in some institutions when it comes to you. But creating the deal, creating the leads is not something that many institutions have a formal process to do. They are reacting rather than creating that pipeline. Okay, and I would have thought this number would have been smaller actually, right? Because many of them actually don't have a process to do lead development at all, right?
There can be overlaps also.
Yeah. So maybe some of you are interpreting both with some overlap, as she's saying as well. Post tech transfer contract life cycle management is poor in many institutions, royalty audits and so on, which is the right thing that many of you have put, that needs to be improved sometimes. And also tracking infringements, litigations and so on, that is something which many institutions don't do, okay? Which is again, so there is no threat to an infringer in that sense. Some academic institutions have done well in that. Maybe you will give us some stories at some point. Maybe WARF, which has done well, but not necessarily every institution has done well in tracking infringements and so on and so forth. Yeah, coming. Which of the following decisions are made efficiently and in a well-informed manner in your institutions? Okay, so decision to file IP in India. Okay, that seems to be fairly well made, right? Foreign jurisdictions, decisions to maintain and renew IP. Well, I can tell you that lot of patents actually are allowed to lapse by institutions just because nobody is watching them in India. Okay, that's the hard reality, right? So it's not just decisions; it's also the process of tracking this. So when a request comes back, say after 3-4 years, back to the institution saying that please defend your patent, saying examiner gives these comments, either there is nobody watching it or nobody is responding to it, right, and therefore it lapses. Of course, we are still learning mode, but that is a fact that is happening today, right? Decisions to invest on IP costs, decisions for deal closure and decisions on notices and litigations, right? This I can understand will be much lower, but I think many of these can be improved, and that I can also tell you that decisions processes are sometimes the biggest cause of delays, right, as many of you will probably nod your heads, right? So I am surprised you think that's so efficient. It is not, okay? That is the real bottleneck in many institutions. Next. Do you have earmarked funds or dedicated funds for the following in your institution? IP filing, prosecution, maintenance, yes, right? But others are fairly low. Engaging firms for IP services. In the US, most IP filings will be done through attorney firms. The case managers in the tech transfer office are only interfacing with IP firms. Here it might be a little different, right? You might be engaging with IP firms, but a lot of things might be getting done in-house as well. IP legal action, this is low. Engaging lawyers for drafting an agreement. We don't do that as much. There's a lot of guideline documents or model agreements that people use and then build upon it. Many of you must be doing that as well, but that's not necessarily the right way, because your deal structure can be very different in many different ways. Engaging services for decision support. For example, many of your committees or whoever is taking the decision needs to have some information to take a decision. It's not like I like this guy, I don't like this guy, I don't like this invention, whatever it is. It can't be that, right? It has to be a little bit more than that. So that decision support mechanisms, is something which is clearly something which is little lower in terms of what we could be doing. Engaging technology marketing, agencies, that again is fairly low, and third party royalty audits, this is also quite low. So anyway, I'm also giving this as data points for Ashley and Richard there, so that you're familiar with how things work here. Next. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah?
That's the last
Okay, so this is what it is. So now take 2 minutes and that form. Can you go back to the slides? No, can you go back question by question so that they can, especially the policies one. Corresponding to these, right? You can first go to just one. The first question is about policies. So, can you pull out the question relating to policy? Yeah. So these were all the policies. If you want to think in your own organization, you need to put something in place which is missing. You can write it there, right? So you should of course think through what policies are missing currently or what is desirable. Right? Good. Yeah, you can write that down, that it's not, so which ones are not aware? See, for example, you may not be doing these, right? So you can mention that. So, because see, the policy exists on paper, but there's reluctance to implement it, or there is a procedural problem in implementing it. You can write that down, because that's something which you can discuss to find out what you can do to resolve it. Okay? Yeah, you want to comment? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I just have one cautionary note in the data. I noticed when we were looking at the number of institutions that had these different policies, there was one set that really stuck out for me. One was the number that have startup, spin out, venture creation policies, and it was over here. That's good, because as I said in my talk, startups are really critical. More and more and more we realize that's the pathway. Otherwise the technology won't. It'll wither and die. That's important. But
to the policies sheet.
Policies.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, this is good. I mean, it could be better, of course, and everybody should eventually, I think, have one. That should be a goal. But here's what concerns me. Conflict of interest down here. So this gap right here alone says, well, we got a policy for startups, but no conflict of interest. In my world, if you don't have a conflict of interest policy as guide rails, guard rails, you're going to have serious problems, and problems that will be damaging, embarrassing, litigious. I know, because we've lived it. And we had startups where the faculty, inventor, CEO was a problem, and created such problems that the university got sued because we didn't have an effective conflict of interest policy that we had to improve, got the university sued, and the worst part was that that faculty's dean, it was a College of Veterinary Medicine, stood up one day and said, that is the last time we will ever allow a startup, period. And for about 4 years, we didn't do anything because he said no, and he had to retire before we got back into it. So make sure you have a conflict of interest policy.
The whole field of gene therapy was set back for 10 years because of what happened at the University of Pennsylvania when a kid called Jesse Gelsinger died in a trial of a gene therapy, and it turned out that the guy developing it had a company that had rights to it. It set back gene therapy 10 years.
Yeah, thank you. You can keep it with you. I think.
So did we scare you? Did we scare you enough? Get your conflict of interest policy.
If you want to comment more, also it will be helpful. Please sit down. You can speak from there. Yeah. The next one is about agreements, right? So these agreements, okay, are they ones which you thought you should be doing? By the way, if you have a very active tech transfer activity, you should be doing many of these things already. So. And if there are gaps, just put it down so that you can at least take some action on it or discuss it with people here on what they are doing and how you can introduce those, right? Including our faculty, of course. Okay. Let's move to the next category, which is forms. Please remember that anything that you do in policies, forms, your primary objective in tech transfer is to create impact. Okay, it is not necessarily to, it's in order to facilitate that impact, right? As in many institutions such as ours, we have to be careful that it is not something which is impeding creation of impact. Okay, remember that also. So it's important to do it in a way that is positive. And we will discuss a little bit of this in the venturing section, right, where we talk a little bit about conflict of interest and conflict of company, and especially in the Indian context as well. Yeah. And the last one, please. The last one is all the officers and instructions. What is the second thing? Officers and functions. Yeah, I think you have those which are listed in the last. Yeah, it's okay. This one, keep it here. Yeah. Previous one, go back. Yeah. Go back. Yeah. I think this slide is missing. Yeah. So in offices and functions, can you just go to exit out? Go to the my slide. There's an early slide on office and action. Right? Yeah. So out of all of this, of course, you cannot in your capacity decide who you should be reporting to and so on and so forth, or how it should be structured. But you might be having certain functions which are missing in, just go back, up, yeah, one more. Yeah, this one, put this one up, yeah. So in this list, do you find anything which you could be doing, which you are not doing today, right? For example, in NCL, we don't do as much of this systematically, okay, the valorization part. Scientists does it to their own, in their own way, but there's no sort of, we have experimented with this. We did a proof of concept funding kind of an exercise as well. However, it's subject to, of course, being able to deploy those resources flexibly and so on, which we could not do, right? But some of this POC we have done through the Venture Center for startup cases rather than for the necessarily technologies which might be traditional licensing cases. Do you have technologies, if you had a technology which was at an early TRL level and you wanted to translate it further, how is it funded in your organization today? How do you enhance TRL in your organizations today? Anybody?
So in CFTRI we have institutional fund.
Yeah. So CFTRI has an institutional fund. That's good to hear. Yeah.
So that is funded. funding agencies, through that also we do.
Yeah.
So the preliminary proof of concept is made, and
Yeah.
then further development happens there.
Yeah, yeah. So for example, BIRAC has certain funding programs which allow you to translate TRLs. There's one something called AIR, CRS, and so on and so forth, which is meant for academic research institutions as well. How do you handle it in terms of enhancing the quality of or the advancing the TRLs, right?
Yeah. In general, we talk to the potential client. We take some letter showing the interest in the technology, and we may approach director or the decision maker to put some money internally.
Yeah, from lab reserves.
From lab reserves, yes.
Let me also ask Ashley and Richard, do you think, are there formal mechanisms people have developed to fund the advancement of technologies internally?
Sure. One of the things I would say, I was looking to see if I could see it here, that maybe it's not explicitly stated, and that is, I think that the tech transfer office and the tech transfer professionals can, I'll call it, thicken or enhance the compelling business opportunity by doing things like doing a preliminary customer discovery, let's call it, by finding a potential application and going out and doing a survey and getting feedback from potential users to say, yes, this is something we would value and how much, etc. And you can use that then to attract licensees so they don't have to go through that exercise. You can show them, yes, in fact. So that's just one example where it's that business development mindset that you can use to bring a little more, as I say, thickening or to enhance the compelling business opportunity.
Does anybody have a dedicated POC fund that you're familiar with?
Oh yeah, a number of institutions. A lot of them have come from philanthropic sources. So MIT's proof of concept fund is the Deshpande Center, which comes from an Indian entrepreneur, Desh Deshpande, who was a successful IT entrepreneur in the Boston area. So those are some examples. The Wallace H. Coulter Foundation had a national program for biomedical innovation. BU was one of the first of those. And then we have the government programs, which are, unfortunately, they've tended to be putting the funding into startup companies. So you have the SBIR program, which money has to go to a company, and then the STTR program, where there has to be an academic institution and a company involved. And often professors will start a company just to be able to get SBIR funding for it. I know there have been some programs recently that were putting money directly into academic institutions, but I've been out of it long enough that I don't know how effective that's been.
Yeah. So, yeah, please.
I was just going to say that Cornell does have a proof of concept fund. I'll tell you later in the week about something called Ignite, which is a program run by the Tech Transfer Office to provide funding for early stage technology developments. And I'll just throw this in, and that is we're going to talk about an appropriate amount of sharing of revenue to go to the Tech Transfer Office. We'll talk about that later. One of the things that we found was that we think of a certain share, for us it's 1/3 to go to the TTO. There are times when you have a windfall because, for example, in our case, you liquidated some stock in a publicly traded company, one of your startups, and there's a lot of money that suddenly floods in. What's the Tech Transfer Office going to do with it? Put it into a POC fund. So it's a great use of having a policy, a startup policy. What do you do with those monies? Put it into a fund like that.
Okay, great. Yeah, there's a question there.
It's not a question, rather an observation.
Comment,
When there is a call coming up from the, say, funding agencies or the government side, that is being addressed by the PIs, the investigators. But I'm not sure how many of them will involve the TTOs in that.
Yeah.
Because there's no harmony I see there. That is really creating a problem in understanding the TRL levels,
Yes.
where we are and where to go about. That's
Yeah.
the practical problem we face.
Yeah. I agree with you. There are certain programs like STTR. I think the TTOs facilitate some of that, isn't it, Ashley, in the US? The STTR programs, which are funded for specific projects with academia, but with industry partners as well.
It has, a startup company, yeah.
Yeah. So there are programs, but you're right that there could be a better role for TTOs in that process as well. So maybe the MOE needs to do something. Yogesh, I think.
At least they had come up with a list of programs.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. I think what I'm going to request is you can just write your name on the form. We'll just try to we'll aggregate some of your responses and try to compile it. But don't worry, we're not going to use it independently. But Premnath is taking a picture of it. So I think with that we are done. We'll close here for this session. We are late, but I hope you can try and wind up with lunch as quickly as you can. Let's hope everything is in order.